I want to welcome you to our microlearning session on tools for using dp2 and managing dp2 products. This session we're going to record, and it's really came out of a question that happened at the workshop where we kind of realized that there are certain things that have been in dp2 that we update and we modify, but we don't kind of revisit on a regular basis. So a lot of what I'm going to be doing is revisiting some things that have been there for a while, maybe highlighting some of the ways that they can be used, and looking at a couple of things that we've added or changed maybe, not just in the most recent version, but in versions before that. So we can kind of get a bigger picture view of all the different tools and methods that we have for kind of looking at what you have in your products and kind of finding artwork and images or finding a product or dealing with a product. So with that, I have one slide. So this is kind of a list of the different things that I'm going to go through. And some of them are right from the products window. A couple of them that I do want to just really briefly say, remember this is in here, are from the product toolbar itself. And then the last piece was really the focal point and one of the question marks that were the questions that we got that prompted us to do this little micro session. And again, it'll be recorded, so if you want to go back later on and say, what did she say? You'll have that, you'll have it, and it'll be available on Service Desk. I'm going to do one other thing at the very end. There's one last piece when I want to talk about aging, where I'm hoping that I'm going to open up the mics, and I'm hoping that you'll give us a little bit of feedback on when we implement it, ideas for what we might consider doing in that process, because it's slated to have kind of another phase added to it. So this is just a list, and again, I'm going to talk about some of the basic search, maintain product cross-references. Both of those have been there for a very long time. There is a one-time update to maintain that's gotten added recently that I do want to go over. Talk a little bit about product types and workflows, which is really just going to allow me to kind of go into products from edit. I want to talk a little bit about the product info and some of the grid tools. I've got a couple of new small things in it. And then we're going to spend some time going a little bit through labels. If you're not using labels today, or you're not using the find in labels, those are things that can really kind of make your life a lot more efficient. So I'm just going to move us into dp2. And there we go. So just as our starting point, I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about the product window itself, right? It's designed to allow you to see what's going on and see where those products are. But we've had for a really long time the ability to search products. And it's one of those things, and if you're not using it or you haven't used it, it might not occur to you that it's in this right click menu, and you might be, because I see this all the time, right? Labs that are scrolling all the way through all their tabs and then finding the right tab and then scrolling through the products in order to find one. But the search is, it's the same search that you'd find anywhere else, right? It's going to give you the criteria for the search. And in this case, right, I have these up kind of, but you can just search on the product ID, and it's going to give you a list of those product IDs that have that value. And in this case, I just use basic. But you can open them from here. And once you have it open, you can kind of behave any way, it's like opening it right from the product window. It's going to allow you to do whatever you need to do from there. And the same is true, I'm going to leave that open for especially if you're working with a particular product and you want to search it, but you want to search in the product images table. Maybe it's not working right, or something disappeared, or in this case, right, it kind of come down to the order ID. So you want to be able to see where the backgrounds are, what's maybe something's missing or something's happening. So in a case like this, I can open up the layout. I can also open up, and in this case, you can see from those product IDs, maybe it's this one. And it's bringing up a warning that it couldn't find the background. Well, from here, I can actually go ahead and say, okay, well, what's going on, right? It's unable, obviously. I've broken the path. And I did this, as some of you have been through this recently, I know. I recently went from one laptop to the other, and I'm still in the process of finding those images I forgot to get in the right folders on the new laptop as opposed to the others. Now, for you guys, that's obviously a much larger problem. But this is one way that was enabled a long time ago for you to be able to kind of go in and say, okay, where is this, and find the path. And obviously, whatever the path is, I don't have it there, and I would then be able to go ahead and fix this. But that's really labor intensive. So not that long ago, well, maybe, never mind. I'm not going to put years on it. We also implemented what we call the maintain. And the maintain cross-references for, you could do all the categories. I'm not going to do all the categories. Actually what I'll do is I'll select that category I was in, and I'll do it for that category. I could do it. You could work for kind of anyone, right? I can select any one of these. I actually have one that I want to do that with. And I can maintain, and I can do it for this category. And it's going to open up this maintain cross-references, and it really was designed to kind of help me understand where things were and why they were failing. So you can see I have 77 products. This doesn't take very long. You just hit the start button, but what you can do, you see it's going to tell me which ones succeeded over here on the left and which ones failed over here on the right. And it's going to allow me to also see, if I were to select one, it's going to allow me to see, well, why did it fail? And as an example, and we're going to see that in just a second, it's not only going to tell me why, but it was really designed to help me find those images, right? So if I select one of these, and I'm just going to select any one of them, right? And then I actually have the ability to open it from here. Couldn't find a frame file. Now, I can do a couple of different things, right? I can go repath it. I can do all kinds of things, or I can just, get rid of the frame file. I could go into image node properties, and in this case, I might just do that, right? I can go to frame, and I can remove the frame and preview it, and then save it. And then what I can do here is I can retry it. So now it disappears from here because, of course, it's been successful over here and nothing's missing. So these are tools that have really been in there for quite a while. And but it's a really nice way of kind of overall being able to find missing images and to understand why something failed at a much higher level than having to go through them one by one. So as if you were in a search. So from either direction, right? Something's failed, I need to find that one. Or from an umbrella standpoint, I want to take a look at what's going on and get an understanding, especially in the scenario like the one I'm in right now, which is I got my database all set. think I have everything in the right place, but of course I want to check and I want to be able to do it one time, and kind of clean things up so I don't have to go through and do things one by one by one. So that's kind of the way it was originally designed. One of the things that's happened, though, in a very recent versions of dp2 is a one-time update of product usage from order items. And this was added so that we could build a table, some cross-reference, so that we can begin to do some aging, begin to do some, well, I've already got room for improvement. I'll come back to that. I can begin to gather the data that will allow us to ultimately be able to allow you to look at your products from an aging standpoint. And I know we talked very briefly about and showed you that during the workshop, and I'm going to go through that again. So, and I'm just going to show you this for maintain the update. So the update is a window that looks like this. Now I've already run mine, so because it's one time, it's going to tell me that it's 0 products. But the first time that I ran it, I have a couple of thousand products in here, and of course it's going to show me that list. And when I hit go, it's going to go ahead and it's going to get that information from last printed. And if you recall, we have a field in the product that tells us way over here in the end, right, when it was last printed. You can see last printed and number printed. And I think most of you are already aware that that data is in there, but it's only being gathered now in the latest version. So if you want to be able to do that for a previous versions, or historically, going back to all the products you have in your table, you need to run this that first time, and you'll see how many. And you can see we've got the nice added. If you interrupt it and restart the process, it's only going to do those that it hasn't previously analyzed. So it's not the kind of thing that once you start it, you have to stay there and watch it. You can start it and run it and then kind of be done with it. So this is actually the one thing that was added, and I think it was added just for version 22. Some of you who might have had other versions or be updated, you might have seen it before that, but it was introduced for release in version 22. So those are kind of a couple of things that I just wanted to point out from the product window itself. There's just a couple of other things that were also, I know we touched on them at the workshop, but if you either didn't attend the workshop, this is just a little reminder that now workflows is a right-click menu item from the product. Is one of the places you can get at it is from the product table. And it's going to list all your workflows, and it's going to allow you, there's some things that you can do as a function of workflows, and that is in the workshop. I'm not going to go through that here. We might do another micro-learning for kind of taking advantage of workflows as a whole at some other time, but I'm not going to do that today. I do one small thing that I want to point out about workflows is that you can now delete a workflow. And when you delete the workflow, you're not deleting all the things that go with it, but it's just telling you that for order items, products, catalogs, and so on, it's going to remove occurrences of that. So that field in the table that, and again, I'll just right click so I can kind of show you if you're not familiar with it, the workflow field right here in the table, it'll clear that workflow so that, for whatever reason, that you've decided that you don't want to either have that in your system or you don't want to use it. They're just simple. The other thing that I want to point out from here is kind of a little bit tangential to this, but a question came up recently from someone about setting a product type. So I just want to, as a reminder, just kind of highlight that from the product window, any product types that you have can be selected from here. And the product types are a function of chroma key workflows, being able to, and I'm going to go ahead and just open up the Manage Images window so that you have a visual to go with it. The product type is something that you create in the setup so that when you're using subject info, when you're using your own subject data, you have the ability to go ahead and say and use the subject info data table to actually generate, either customer or use dp2 products. And it's one of those things that, if you're not familiar with this workflow, you would really only be using a product type out of the product data table in order to be able to say this is a background ID and identify is it a dp2 or a customer. So that way when you're running work out of your subject info data table, dp2 can kind of automatically make sure the right background is in the right place. And it's one flow inside of the whole composite and chroma key workflow that's implemented in this way because you have to build that relationship here. So I just wanted to mention that while I was kind of working in this environment. So I'm going to open up a product, and it really, for the purposes of what I'm doing, I'm just going to open up, kind of any product. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about that are on the toolbar. The toolbar hasn't changed very much, and I'm not going to kind of go through the routine of the toolbar. I will remind folks just a couple of really simple things, right? Every one of these icons, or a lot of them have properties, and that's where you would define, whether it's fixed size or it's a fixed, got a particular aspect ratio and that kind of thing. So, and I know that sounds really basic, but I actually had somebody stumble upon it, so I wanted to just kind of briefly go, these tools, they're active only when the product is live and you're working on it and so on. The couple of things that I do want to demonstrate, not really demonstrate, but show you here, is that one of the other things that was added relatively recently was kind of the ability to use a color picker to decide what grid color you wanted, and then have that stick so that, once you picked a color, it would stay, and then when you display it, that color would stick. We had a period of time where this would go away and would go back to whatever color, I think it was red. So now that's going to be sticky, and you should get the color that you want every time you open this. And that was done not that long ago, so I wanted to mention it. The other thing that I want to mention in terms of just tools for products and our ability to kind of manage those products across, whatever workflow you're in, is the ability to do it at a product level, right? We have a lot of different tools for doing things at an image level or an order item level, or things that we implement from inside of some other workflow, like manage images. But in a case like this, and there's one in particular I want to talk about, but I'll briefly go through, right? We've got the chroma key where you can set up a product that is specific to a background. So that product is always going to have that background. And you can use macros, it's the same kind of thing. You can use any background that you have set up in your dp2 products. You have the ability here to, act within a particular subject info workflow, and let us know kind of what's happening, a quantity or a subject info field, and to kind of build the relationships there. The one that is more recent, though, is our ability to create an environment where, instead of having to put text into a product, a trigger, right? When we did events, we created a trigger for the product so that something could happen at the time it was rendered. It was originally, you had to go in and do that as a text, but this was added where you can associate it with an event ID, and the event, and again, I'm not going to go kind of big into events, but the event has to already be created. dp2 has to understand what the event is going to do. It needs an action. You need to set the relationship. It has to have a worker. In this case, it's got to have a queue, right? So you can, any one of your queues that, kind of are set up. The parameter here in a case like this might be something like, from the order item, pulling and populating the order ID somewhere. Maybe it's an email or a text message. And you want to say, oh, your order XYZ is ready to go, or, here's the link for it, and that kind of thing. So, or if there's data that goes with it, again, depending on what you're trying to do here. This, you're able to do this now using this part of the UI, rather than having to, write it in Notepad++ and getting it into the text part of the product itself. So I wanted to kind of point that out as something else that I don't think we've kind of added in any one of our other pieces. So I kind of grouped it into the products as a whole. So actually with that, yeah, why not? I'll worry about what I did to it later. I did have a couple of questions, and I wanted to pause to just take a look at those. Oh, this is a suggestion. Oh, very cool. Okay. Thank you, Mark. And I'm gonna circle back to this at the end, because I think it will bear some discussion. So thank you. That was a suggestion about the search criteria. So at the workshop, we had a question about ability to kind of favorite things inside of products. And as I said earlier, we've watched so many of you kind of go through and be clicking to find that category. And I only have a couple of thousand products. I don't have 30,000 or 100,000. So I can, and I'm sympathetic to all you folks that have to go through that. We implemented what we call labels with this little green arrow a number of versions ago. I don't know exactly when, but many versions ago. The idea being that we wanted you to be able to create your own labels, your own kind of, not categories, but kind of modified search criteria, right? You get to say, I just want to find what's in this one label. And in my case, I'll just show you what because I have some sample labels. I have albums, I have calendars, right? It's just going to show me that calendars that are in that category. I actually created a favorites category for this one because I do have products that I use all the time. And from a training standpoint, you know, some of these are those, but I didn't put them all in. But I have two different ones because not only do I have my category called favorites, but I have proofs and then I have units. So this allows me to group those so that, and there are labs I've seen who a particular operator will have their own label. They might have QA might have a label. There's all sorts of different ways of doing this, but it allows you to really then just be able to look for exactly what you want in a minimum of time. And this is one of those places where I click the favorites to get these, but to go back, I just have to simply move my mouse. You know, it just simply wands over. To get there, and I'm going to keep this pretty brief, but to get there, I'm going to open up the second products window. It's really simple to kind of go to where you want to go. I have my favorites is still open, and I'm going to kind of go back to favorites so I can get to maybe units. And in order for me to get a new product into my units, I can just simply drag it into my category, you know, below. You need two product windows to do this. It's one of those things, it's really straightforward to do. I actually started one for my microlearning for the ones I was going to use, you know, but I was thinking about production, you know, what will production need? I have memory mates, proofs, units, a similar thing. So the labels capability inside the product window is really useful, especially if there are certain products that you're working with all the time. It doesn't move the product, it doesn't change the categories, it simply creates sort of an instance of it within the labels and the label hierarchy. And the label hierarchy will actually show you, if I go out here to right click, it's going to show me what is in my product production and then what's in units, so that I, you know, kind of really can get any view of it that I need to. So that's kind of the whole labels concept. And I know some of you are using it, so, you know, I think it's really helpful. I'll be interested in if you have suggestions for and ideas here as well. I can go back, I can see all my categories. So if I wanted to just see one category, I can do it from here. And again, all I'm doing is moving back and forth. I can see all my categories. Same thing is true, I can see my workflow. So if I just want to see what's in my black and white, in this case, it's going to show me what category it's in, and then it's going to show me that product. You know, so all of my workflows will be listed here. The find, I've watched a lot of people use this and I'm always glad to see that, right? So if I want to just find 8 by 10, right, it's going to show me that 8 by 10. It's going to show those in each individual category so I can look at it that way. So if you're not using these, I strongly encourage you to. A couple of these, right, all books, all packages, those are pretty straightforward, and those were there from the beginning. Products and catalogs was introduced when we started to introduce catalogs. And then from the More link, you can also use these to see customer-based products, right? So here I have two different customers, the sample customer, and I've got a composite in there. So that's really, if you do use, and I know many of you use customer-based products, it's really helpful to be able to just go then find a customer. And this is, of course, based on, you know, either your customer data or however you've organized the customer specific products. Users is another place that we don't talk about a lot. And I, you know, as I was preparing for this to make sure I had a user, the users is something that is exists. Again, it's a field in the product data table, and it's called user, right? But if you populate that field, you can actually search. So in addition to not just being able to do labels, you can actually, especially if you organize this way, if you have a particular user in your system and you want to be able to organize, and again, I'm not moving anything, I'm not changing categories, I'm just making it possible for me to easily find these and use them when I need them. So it's another tool. It's styles, of course. The label hierarchy is just going to be a big table that shows you where everything is and how you set it up. The aging is actually the piece that was added for version 22, and you know, this data that we were using for aging is part of the data that is gathered or implemented when you do that maintain cross-reference, that one-time analysis, if you will, of last printed and whether or not it's been printed. So I'm just going to leave today's date, right? And it's going to show me older than. I have 31 that are older. And I want to look at maybe the ones that have never been printed. So it's going to show me which ones have never been printed. And again, it's going to go back. I have lots that have not been printed, right? I have 1,149 that have never been printed because a lot of time I just create them, I don't print them. But it's also going to then allow me to look at the ones that have no order items. And this is really helpful. I know that for a lot of you, and this was actually done in response to a question from a customer who said, hey, I need to figure out the products that I haven't been using. I need to kind of purge. I want to clean up and that kind of thing. So they were trying to find a way to begin to do that. This was kind of the first phase of what we were doing here. The second phase, of course, is going to be figuring out, you know, what features would you guys want us to have in terms of, okay, now that I've identified all those products and which ones have order items and which ones haven't been printed or which ones are old and haven't been used in a while, is that if we were to kind of implement a delete, right, what would that look like? What would you want it to include? How might you think it wants to work? I have one more thing that I think I mentioned it briefly at the workshop, but I do want to go back through and just as a reminder and kind of this overall product, and actually I'm going to do this from composites, the overall product kind of handling products and tools for managing products is the when we added the layout helpers, we've made some improvements to those, and we've added some feature sets, and we've done a couple of other things that I just want to point out to you real briefly. One of those is what we're calling, oh, look how I'm sticking, the node helper. And I think I might have very briefly showed it to you guys, but these are within the layout helpers. And we've got the calendars. We're working, actually doing some things for the calendars now. And kind of continuing to improve those. So again, if you have suggestions, we're going to be looking for them. We've also made some improvements to the composites piece, but for this one, I just want to, again, as a kind of a last tool before I open it up for kind of questions and feedback, is the node selector that's going to allow you to kind of, especially if you have a lot of nodes and there's a lot of layers to your nodes, be able to select that node from here, be able to look at the ones that contain macros, that don't contain macros, countable nodes, custom name nodes. And then when you select it here, have dp2, you know, select that inside the layout is selecting that layout. Or same is true when I move to select a node, or in this case, a set of nodes, dp2 is automatically selecting it over here, which is going to kind of allow you to really be able to kind of deal with them in a much more fluid way than we have with layers. A couple of things that were also here is the ability to, and for those of you who use this as a way to kind of have information in the layout and in the order item, but then not render it or not print it, it's going to allow you to do that right from it within this window, which is really handy because then you're not going to, you know, have to go in and open up image and no properties. You can do it right from here. So those are a couple of the other things that, you know, improvements that we're making, features that we're adding in order to overall help you to manage your products. It was a pleasure to have all you guys on the line. Thank you so much for taking a little time out of your afternoon. It's very much appreciated.